Hello, this is your host, Drew Davis, and I want to thank you for listening to episode 194 of Learn How to See Better. It's the only podcast out there that'll improve your vision the longer you listen. So let's start with awareness. I'm thinking back to, it's probably been coming up on 11 years now, to an event I went to called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And T. Harv Eker was the person who was essentially putting that event on, right? He's got a book by the same name. And one of the monumental lessons that I learned is they said awareness is the first step towards change. And I thought that was kind of an interesting concept, awareness. All right, my eyes are open. I'm aware of the world around me. But this was really meaning awareness at a different level as I started to think about it. And I started to think about how, to me, awareness is really kind of that clarity in your ability to see what's going on around you, what's going on in your own world, what's going on in your life. And it begs the question, what are the things that you're aware of on a day-to-day basis? Do you have a basic level of awareness for things that are happening in your life? Let's say if you're always, quote unquote, always getting into arguments, what sort of awareness could you have around that situation? That sequence of events in your life. Maybe you're just around a lot of upset people that like to debate, or maybe there's a common denominator there, right? What else are you aware of? Are you aware of things in your life physically that might be taking place? I remember some time ago, I had a job where I was busy at a desk a lot, right? And so if any of you know what it's like to sit at a desk all day, it can start to mess with your body and how you feel sometimes. And I actually had an incident once where I went to stand up and it was actually difficult to stand up. I think I'd been sitting so long, my lower back muscles were overstretched, and I tried to stand up real fast, and it's like the body was like, hey, wait a minute. I had to learn a certain level of awareness that it was hard to stand up because I'd been sitting too long, right? And that type of habit, if you're not aware of it, can really become something that becomes turn into something that's a lot more prevalent in your life, right? You hear about people with a bad back, they've got certain physical limitations. If you can have a certain awareness as to what's causing these sooner than later, many times they can be mitigated or avoided altogether. So I was just thinking about sometimes awareness can be a tricky thing because you might have your head down, really focused on something, and still be unaware. You've heard the phrase that, they can't see the forest for the trees. And the idea there is that someone's got such a maniacal focus on one particular thing that everything else is kind of lost in the background. They can't see the forest for the trees. They're in the middle of a bunch of trees, but the tree right in front of them is what's really got their mind focused. And so they can't see. They don't have that awareness. So sometimes we have to expand our current level of awareness to get an accurate picture of what is going on around you. And then you too can make that first step towards change by using awareness. As for me in the past month, I can say awareness was pretty big in my world because I'm constantly looking to learn how to see better, as the title of the podcast indicates. But sometimes you'll find as you are moving forward in your growth journey, it's perfectly possible you might develop a couple of blind spots. You might think you have some things licked or some areas or lessons learned that you've already mastered and you can move on to the next stage, but you might have to face some of those things at a higher level. It's kind of like the video game Super Mario Brothers, the original one, part one. You still ended up at that castle at level 4, whether it was World 1, World 2, and each time it would get harder. So you couldn't just be content that you knew how to jump over a fireball. This time there's a swinging chain of fireballs. Now what are you going to do then, right? It's one thing when you face the Hammer Brothers, throwing the hammers at you, but it's another thing when you got Bowser spitting fire while the Hammer Brothers are throwing hammers at you. So you could be facing some of the same challenges at a different level, and having that awareness that in many cases you already possess what it is you need to get through the situation that you're in. But sometimes you have to take it back to the basics. You have to gain a greater awareness, and some of that awareness can be through really just honesty with yourself about what you're seeing, right? You might see something in your life that you deem as unpleasant. It's not about just trashing and bad-mouthing that thing, but being honest in your perception of what you're experiencing and having some responsibility to acknowledge what you may have done to create it. So awareness is a very powerful tool. I've been looking to use it more in my own world as we shine the light in the corners and look to really illuminate our overall experience. Awareness is one of those key pieces. The next thing I want to talk about for big ahas, looking at the last month or so, right? It's talking about balance. I told you this is easy as ABC. First with A, awareness, B, balance. I think the reason balance comes up is because if you've ever had a scenario in your life where you're pursuing something, maybe it's an athletic or fitness goal, maybe you're trying to, lose weight for the high school reunion, maybe you're trying to push for a big promotion at your job, maybe you're trying to build your business to a certain revenue level. There can be seasons where you feel things are out of balance. And we need to be able to take stock of that and understand, all right, are things lopsided in my life currently? If I look at the whole wheel of my life, the different categories and areas that I could be happy, have things got to the point where a little bit lopsided? And if so, it's really about understanding, is there a legitimate reason, and is it for a fixed season? Because, just about anybody, if they're focused enough, can go on, 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night for a handful of nights, for a handful of weeks even, if the cause is big enough. But after about a month, you're going to be running out of gas. You're going to need some reprieve. You're going to need some R&R. You're going to need to recharge the batteries. And so understanding, how do you bring balance? If you are looking to move the needle in one direction, you're looking to move the needle in one area, is that going to have adverse effect in another area? Because you might be so focused on your business that you could be out of alignment with connecting with your family, right? And, there's no success in life that could substitute for failure of the home, right? You've heard that quote before. So as we look at some of these things and say, does our drive really keep us balanced, or have we reached a point that things are lopsided and are out of alignment? Because if they are, sometimes it's simple as acknowledging that fact and then taking a moment to say, is this okay? Because what might be okay for a little while might not be okay for a long while, right? So looking at that balance is important because you know what, if we're not looking at the efforts and the sacrifices we make to get to any kind of greater good, and we leave out that prize on the other side, the price that we pay for the promise, part of that balance isn't rewarding yourself. Maybe it's paying your family back with interest for the time that you spent away building the business. I can think of a specific time in business where my wife and I were really kind of pushing to get to a specific goal. And once we knew we had been working hard for some time and we closed on a really big deal and had a pretty glorious payday, we decided, hey, we're taking an international trip. We're taking the kids to Costa Rica. We're going to have a great time. And that's what we did. And that was the way we symbolized an ability to reward ourselves, because we knew that we'd been attending events to enhance our business skills and acumen. And we knew that we'd been leaning into the family and the relationships to help us out with some of the childcare coverage. So there'd been a season of imbalance, but that season was capped, right? We knew that it was only going to be a little bit lopsided for a little while, and then we'd be able to give ourselves a big reward. And that's exactly what we did. And it really helped things to really feel like they're worth it. I mean, we still go back today and look at some of these family photos from Costa Rica and say, yeah, if you compare the experiences attained to the sacrifices and efforts put in, right? Are you up? Are you on top? Or do you feel like it was a loss? And, these are experiences that the kids even remember. And I'd say it's well worth it, because these were short sprints, right? Short range sprints to help reach a long-term plan. You got to be smart and be understanding of when you have to get to that point where you bring things into proper balance so you don't get out of whack. Last but not least, big ahas in the last 30 days. Easy as ABC. We got awareness. We got our balance. What's that C stand for? The C stands for courage. Because it may be that awareness has brought you the insight that you may have some areas of your life that are out of balance or out of alignment. So the question is, now that you've got the info, what are you going to do about it? And that's where the C comes in. That's where the courage is applied. That's when you recognize that it's easy to look the other way and not face something that you probably should have been dealing with, right? Everyone's had this happen at some point in their world. Maybe they let their Um, maybe they let their physical composition drift to be different than what they deem as under control and discipline, right? Maybe they let their spending and their finances get a little bit lax in the discipline and not watching the outflow versus the inflow quite as closely, right? And things took on a life of their own. Well, again, it can be easy to look the other way, easy to avoid, easy to hide some of those difficult scenarios, right? Owning up to the fact that you've maybe drifted away from what your true north was. Maybe your disciplines have gotten out of whack and they need to get tuned back into that North Star. They need to get tuned back into the focus. They need to get tuned back into what the plan and the goal is. Because we can be very creative in avoiding things that we have to do, right? There's many a story about, a sales rep that's really good at shuffling business cards on his desk, but not so good at making the calls that generate the revenue, right? So when they got to go meet with the sales manager at the end of the week and the sales manager is asking you how many calls you made and then looking for a number that fits in the box, they don't care how organized your desk is. What have you done for me lately? Where's the revenue? Okay. So I think that knowing that creative avoidance is really something that's like a form of it's a form of cowardice, right? It's a form of fear, not facing what needs to be addressed in your world. So if you can develop some courage to recognize, hey, I've been hiding from this fact that something's out of whack in my world. Now's the time to face it. That's actually going to give you an opportunity to feel empowered, because when you face your fears, it builds confidence. Easy as ABC. Action builds confidence. You can always build confidence with action, because action cures fear, right? Think about that. Action cures fear. So the courage, if you can have the honesty and the awareness to recognize you may be out of balance and have a courageous attempt at fixing that, and not having a fear of the conflict or the fear of the discomfort that may come with making changes, right? Maybe you got to put the sweets in the pantry in the back freezer, right? Or near the back freezer. Maybe you've heard of cases where people have to stick a credit card in a block of ice, right? Maybe you need to hide your passport to keep you from the next international excursion if it's not the right time. But having the courage to face really any challenge and not just leave it to be addressed on its own. If any of you own a home or property and you got a front yard or a backyard, you don't just let the weeds tend to themselves. They don't take care of themselves. You've got to uproot and get rid of the weeds. Otherwise, they'll take over the garden. So the courage is going to build you confidence, because leaning into and being courageous is going to empower you, help build that confidence. And it makes me think of two specific instances here where I can think of, champions in their field where they've been able to impart wisdom upon me in regard to the area of courage and confidence, right? So there's a famous wrestler. You maybe have heard of him, maybe haven't. His name's Jordan Burroughs. He's the all-time Olympic gold medal winner in wrestling. And I had a chance to hear from him not too long ago, and he was talking about the subject of confidence. And the big takeaway is he was saying that, a lot of your confidence, he said there's two flavors of confidence. There's intrinsic and extrinsic confidence. And this was interesting because, this guy's a gold medalist every, so many times over. You'd think, oh, you're naturally confident. It's just built in. And he was saying, yeah, you do have to have a certain level of intrinsic confidence to help, drive you. But when you're looking to reach some of those peak levels of achievement, you've really got to have extrinsic confidence, which oftentimes comes from the team you surround yourself. Now, don't take this to go necessarily say you just need a bunch of hype men around to just say stuff to get you feeling good. But from the standpoint of creating that effect, it could be as simple as that. Having a team that supports you, helps you when you're going through the game tape and studying the film, you're seeing the errors, they're seeing the improvements. Okay, that could be valuable, right? To help you build that confidence and know that, okay, you're not making the mistake the same way you made that move before that got you pinned. Now you can do this way. Now you're seeing that you're not susceptible to that pitfall anymore. So getting that extrinsic confidence can be a key piece to helping you build yours as you combine that with your intrinsic confidence that's based on you being courageous in the things you take on and face in your world. And last but not least, from another champion in their sport, two champions, one champion and a story about another champion. This champion I heard a story from, and it's a story from Dan Kennedy, who was doing some training talking about really when you're looking at confidence, it can be one of those things where it's needed or required extrinsically at the highest level of performance. And this time the subject was the boxer, Mike Tyson. Everybody knows the name, famous boxer, one of the greatest of his time, right? But the story goes like this. They said even Mike Tyson, back in his heyday, had a couple of big guys, maybe there was his bodyguards or security detail that he hired to walk around with him and tell him how tough he looked, right? To tell him he was the man, basically helped to pump up that confidence, right? And so he would have that team around him that helped him feel basically 10 foot tall and bulletproof all the time. And so the question becomes, how courageous are we to go out and look to help ourselves be more confident, intrinsically and extrinsically, right? Intrinsically, maybe we have to get some better inputs into our world, hang around some better people, some individuals that are going to be more inspiring, recognize what our entertainment to education ratio is like. And if we spend all our time partying and having fun, maybe there's some more investment we can put into that real estate upstairs between our two ears, okay? So be sure to give some thought to how awareness, balance, and courage could be three takeaways that are easy as ABC that you could apply to your world to help improve the quality of life that you're living right now. I challenge you to open your eyes a little bit wider, to see into your own world, understand what's happening, inspect what you expect, right? What have you done to create the life that you're living now? Are you pleased with it? If not, maybe it's just out of balance, out of alignment, but know that it can be changed. You just got to be courageous enough to confidently move forward and make those changes. So that's what I want to share with you that I've learned over the last 30 days, consistently learning how to see better. Hopefully you can take some of this away and apply it to your world. And remember, it's easy as ABC. All right, everybody, this is your host, Drew Davis. I want to thank you for listening to Learn How to See Better. It's the only podcast out there that'll improve your vision the longer you listen. See you on the next episode.